Hi everyone, welcome back to another Reddit cheating story. Before we start, please hit the subscribe button and notification bell if you love to watch more cheating stories. My 35 meters, wife, 34F, shared the real truth about previous trust issues. TLDR, my wife, 34F, and I, 35 meters, have been married for about 6 years. We've had some trust issues in the past that resulted in quite a few nasty arguments. She brought up some truths about past arguments/lies, and our marriage is now in complete shambles. Some backstory. We met randomly while she was still living with her BF of 7 years. She had told me her relationship was pretty much falling apart because her BF was an alcoholic and she was leaving him. She ended up moving in with her mom a couple weeks after we met. Early on, I'd say things were going well for a couple months until she mentioned to me that her ex-boss, 50 meters, was trying to help her financially for a deposit for an apartment. It was a fairly rocky situation since she and I were still getting to know each other, not formally BF/GF yet, and my first question to her was why she was still in contact with her old boss. She told me it was because they were on good terms and he wanted to help her out. That was kind of our first major argument, since I thought she had no business taking money from someone with shady/unclear intentions. I pretty much stated my feelings about the situation and we moved on from that, or so I thought. Around 6 months later, we made things official and ended up moving in together, and things were good for a bit. We had gone to visit her sister out of state, and a few days later I found a wad of cash, $600, in her purse. My first thought was that her sister had lent her money during the trip. I did have a suspicion that it was from my ex-boss. But I really didn't have any proof, and her sister has helped her out financially in the past. She eventually admitted that she was still texting her ex-boss and had also sent him a risque picture of her in a corset from her early 20s to show him how people dressed in the club scene back in the day. She showed me the texts and they were fairly innocent. Mostly hellos and keeping in touch about work at my ex-boss's old office. But she swore to me that her sister had lent her the money. After going back and forth, she ended up changing her number, and I decided to take her word for it and mostly let it go. Also, early in our relationship, while talking about prior relationships, she had told me another story about another coworker she had gotten close with around a year before we met. She told me things didn't lead anywhere sexually with that guy, but I did find it suspicious that she was still trying to meet up with him to discuss a job opportunity at his new business. That guy ended up moving out of the country months later, as far as I know, and it never really came up again until fairly recently. We ended up getting married after a couple of years of living together. We've had brutal arguments here and there about random things. I was apprehensive about marrying her at first, but we talked it through and eventually made peace with a lot of things. Things were good for a while. We have 2 children now. Fast forward to around 2 years ago, we were at home drinking and chatting about exes during a movie night, and my wife mentions that she did indeed hook up with her ex-coworker, not the ex-boss, the year before we met. She sheepishly said she hadn't told me because she didn't want me to judge her, since she had technically cheated on her ex, and the guy wasn't really into her. Fine. It happened before we met and nothing really happened between her and that guy when I was in the picture, I think. Couple months after that, we're drinking and she blurts out that the money from back then did come from her ex-boss, and if I have an issue with it I can divorce her. She told me she felt entitled to that money from him because he owed her some bonuses from when he was her boss. Eventually, she admitted that she considered having him as a sugar daddy. At this point, I'm sort of in shock. Why bring any of that up? I started to get annoyed by this trickle of truth. I mean, I had pretty much forgotten and made peace, I think, with most of the original stories/explanations, besides some joking about it here and there. In a sense, my trust for her was completely shattered. What other truths will I find out next, and will I be okay with them? Things have pretty much spiraled out of control since then. We started having arguments even more often. We weren't very intimate to begin with, and eventually it was just me trying to initiate, so I stopped. Eventually, we bought a king-size bed and I started sleeping on the other edge of the bed away from her, going on 2 years now. I have tried suggesting for us to go to marriage counseling, and she pretty much just says it's my issue to deal with on my own, since she's over all of that stuff and she really doesn't remember much about anything. Selective memory? I feel completely withdrawn from my end. She recently asked me if we're okay, and that resulted in another argument. I feel like she's unapologetic about what happened in the past. She didn't give me the chance to come to terms and process/accept whatever happened back then when it was actually happening. I do admit that I carry some trauma from a prior relationship where an ex-girlfriend admitted to me 4 years into the relationship that she had cheated on me early on. That relationship ended up fizzling out after around 8 years. My wife is well aware about that, but maybe she didn't remember when she brought all that up? I want to figure out a way to repair the relationship and marriage, but I feel like I don't trust her anymore. I feel like she misrepresented a lot of things about herself when we got together, and I willingly overlooked a few severe issues on the premise that things would get better. We're sort of strangers now, and the last thing I want is to stay together just for the kids in a dying marriage. I've been sort of on hold mentally about all this for some time. My kids have long-term medical issues, and my mother may pass away soon. My fear is that I'll take the wrong steps and walk away before finding some way to mend the relationship. My thoughts are that if I deal with it on my own, I'll end up divorcing her regardless if more trickle truths come out in the open. Have any of you been in a similar situation on either side? Has your partner/spouse brought up some skeletons in the closet that upended the relationship? Thanks in advance for your feedback. Here are some of the best comments from our community. Trickle truth is the worst. You are right, it doesn't let you process, forgive and move on in the moment. And when it comes up again, it hits hard again, plus you can add on the unresolved first episode of the very same issue or action, and the bonus deception. Tell her what you told us. You want to make an effort to save your marriage. For you, this means the whole truth and nothing but the truth to let you process and forgive and move on. I found out about trickle truth, being cheated on, the hard way, and what I learned was that when my ex said she had told me everything, she was still lying. I found out because after a while she would have forgotten what exactly she told me and tried to avoid answering, and then just fell back on quotes like I had to get over it and she wasn't thinking about that anymore. She is a historically bad liar. I got lucky to get out. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell.